Good day. I'm Gert van Rensburg, and I start with a couple of talks that you may follow. And if you like it, please share it and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can get all the talks in the future. There were a couple of questions raised about topics that I've been discussed. I'm a minister, and during worship services, I talk about these topics and we have discussion groups on them. And there's a lot of people that cannot attend because I live in Hamilton in Canada. And I decided to try and help and talk about these topics on YouTube or on podcast, don't know which way you want to call it, to help people to get this information, which I think is really important. So I am a minister in the Christian church. I have my background as being studied theology for 6 years in South Africa at the University of Pretoria, and around about 27 to 28 years of experience within different congregations and denominations of the Christian church. So recently, during the last couple of years, a lot of new information came to our attention, which I believe is really, really crucial and very important to take note of if you are serious about the Christian faith and if you are serious about where our faith comes from and where we are going. So therefore, these talks, but enough of the background. So most of the new information we get is archaeological findings that has been studied over many, many years. We must remember an archaeological site takes around about 40 to 60 years, say for instance 50 years to excavate the site, because it goes very slowly. They work with old antique evidence and they unearth them, and it's a slow process. So it's not something that's been discovered today and tomorrow it's available to the public. So after that, discoveries has been made over many years. The studies start from different angles by the archaeologists and then also by experts in the different fields. So the findings that I find fascinating has been studied by Matt LaCroix, one of the, I think, experts in the field of archaeological findings across the world, and he studied the findings of these archaeologists and then bring it in a very understandable way to us to implement or to study in accordance with our own faith. So this is where all these, not all, but most of these new findings are coming from. And it doesn't matter if you do not believe in this. I believe Jesus at some stage said, even the rocks will call out the truth if you do not want to hear it. And here we are in that moment in history where literally the rocks calls out the truth of ancient civilizations, what they believed and how they influenced us in the modern era and modern day we live in. So we can call these people names, and we can call them blasphemous, and we can call them not true to our faith, and we can ignore them as long as we want. But these evidence will not go away, and it will come on back again and again and again to visit us until the day that we recognize it and that we look at it as I am trying to do and find a way to find the real truth behind our stories that we have in the Bible. So the Bible stories is interesting because most of them in the Old Testament comes from an archaeological site that that they have discovered in a city in northern Iraq called Mosul. Now Mosul has a very interesting history. Mosul was the ancient city, or has been built on the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh. Now Nineveh, you will remember in the story of Jonah, he was sent to preach to Nineveh and the big fish and everything that goes along with that. So in the Nineveh city that was established by Ashurbanipal, one of the last kings of the Assyrian Empire. And you will also know about the Assyrians from the Bible in 724 before Christ. The Assyrians overran Israel and took most of the people into exile to Assyria. Most of them did never return. That was the first exile of the 10 northern tribes of Israel that was known as Israel. The second exile in 586 before Christ was done by the Babylonians, and then they took them to Babylon in exile, and most of them returned to rebuild the temple. And that history you can read in Nehemiah and those books in the Old Testament. So back to Assyria. Assyria has been built on the ruins of the Sumerian civilization, which is way older than Assyria. So the artifacts that Ashurbanipal started to find across his empire, he collected them and he brought them together in Nineveh, today's Mosul, and he started a library. He collected them, literally, and put them in his library. And it's been discovered now, and archeological studies opened that library up, and many of the artifacts that they found there, you can find them and go and see them in the British Museum in London. So many of these stories that we find in the artifacts relates to the Bible stories. It's way older than the Bible stories because it's probably findings that comes from the Sumerian civilization, much older than the books of the Bible that we have. And it can be said that most of the stories that we have in the Old Testament has been influenced by these stories that we find in Ashurbanipal's library in Assyria or in the city of Nineveh. Today, Mosul. Sadly, a lot of these artifacts were destroyed during the Desert War, where the USA attacked Iraq, and you know that history, and I don't want to become part of discussions about that. Sad stories happened, and many of the artifacts have been destroyed. Luckily, a lot of them have been removed by that time and kept in safe places like the British Museum in London. So these are artifacts that's been written in clay, and then they baked it, and it kept quite a while. You know, they are old manuscripts written into the clay, and they can still study them today because now they are kept in a safe place. Of course, many of it is being ignored because it tells of stories that we as Christians does not want to know. We don't want to listen to that because it sometimes tells us a different story or give us more perspective on the Bible stories. I want to take an example. Abraham, one of the three most important figures in the Judaistic faith, or the Jews, was called from the city of Ur, and this you can go and read in the Old Testament, and it is called the city of the Chaldeans. Now that Ur was the city of the king of Uruk, which was one of the first Assyrian kings. So this is right at the beginning of the Assyrian Empire, where they started to build their cities. So these cities were built by the kings, and then as the kingship moved down the line to the next king, most often he moved the city within the Assyrian Empire, and that is how, when the king became Ashurbanipal, the kingship moved to the city of Nineveh, and that became the capital of Assyria. So Abraham has linked back to the Assyrian people. That's his lineage or family bloodline comes from the Assyrian people, which was built on the Sumerians. So there's a direct link from the later Hebrew people through the Assyrian link of Abraham back to the way older Sumerian civilizations that we can find and that are unearthed by the archaeologists and their findings and their studies. So that's an important link, because at Lake Vaughan, which you can find in eastern Turkey. Lake Vaughan has a very interesting history. It was for many, many years part of the Armenian people that still to this day live in the area. And if you also go back in history, there was an enormous genocide that involved the Armenian people. And today they're part of Turkey and just north of Turkey in the Caucasus Mountains. And if you go there today, you can find, as one of the later children of the Armenian people that's part of our congregation here, she says, you cannot stretch your arm in any direction in the old Armenian lands and you will touch a cross. Because the cross is a very important symbol of the Christian faith. And at Lake Vaughan, they unearthed one of the oldest temples that we have found as of date, as up to this day. That doesn't say there aren't older temples, they should be, but this temple is one of the oldest, and it's dated back to 13,000 years before Christ. And that is very important, because in that temple, as they excavated the temple, they found the symbol of the cross. And that symbol is probably the oldest symbol of the cross that we have today, as a cross being used within some kind of religion, because it is found within the temple at Lake Vaughan. And with this cross, there are other symbols which play a very important role in kind of explaining to us what this cross means. So back to our Christian faith, we have the idea that we have the sole right on the symbol of the cross. And when you see a cross today, and Christians will immediately interpret it as this is the symbol of Christianity. We wear it around our necks. The Catholic people make the cross on their bodies when they pray. So there's many instances where the cross is very important. If you enter a Christian church, you will see the cross somewhere, if not everywhere. And that's why the cross is a very important symbol. And where does that come from? Originally, the cross wasn't a symbol of Christianity. It came about roughly in the year 314 after Christ, when the then Caesar of the Roman Empire had his well-known dream, and you probably know about this, where he saw his armies fight under the symbol of the cross, and they were victorious. So he interpreted it as that he needs to find out what this cross is, and that he should use it as the symbol of his armies, and they painted it on all their shields. And then he found the Christian faith and the crucifixion of Jesus, and the story happens from then. He became the chair of the first council of the new Christian faith, and the council was at Nicaea, which is a lake city around the Black Sea in Turkey. And they had the first council there, invited all the bishops under chairmanship of the Caesar of the Roman Empire, and he said to them, you need to get your act together, you need to speak out of one mouth, all these different interpretations ends here, because I want to make this the official faith of the Roman Empire. Caesar, the story goes, Caesar Constantine was looking for something that he can reunite the empire. It was busy, falling apart. And what a better weapon to reunite an empire than through a faith or a religion. So the Christian religion officially started there. The Roman Catholic Church started there, because Caesar Constantine kind of said to these people, if you form this one church, you will have lots of wealth. You will be the official religion of the Roman Empire. They just came through years and years of persecution because they were not welcomed in many areas. They were missionaries talking about the Jesus story, and they were not greeted very friendly. Lots and lots of these people lost their lives. And now they had the opportunity, and who wouldn't take it, to become the Romans' official religion. And there at 324 after Christ, the symbol of the cross, of course, Caesar Constantine dreamt about it. It was used by the Christians, not officially, but it was well known because Jesus was crucified on a cross. And then it became the official symbol, not only of the Roman Catholic Church, but also of our faith. The idea of the cross within Christianity goes back to the time of Jesus. Just after Jesus was born and King Herod died, there was a revolt within Israel against the Roman Empire that occupied the land. This revolt was suppressed by the Romans, and they made an example of all those people that stood up against the Roman Empire, and they crucified him. All along the roads, at the cities and big towns' entrances, they erected these crosses and they crucified these people. So the cross was a symbol of fear and a warning symbol. If you stand up against us, this is the way you will end. You will lose your life on the cross. After Jesus Christ was crucified, because that's the way the Romans dealt with people that didn't fall in line and didn't follow the rules of the day, and Jesus was one of them. The Romans that didn't want to crucify him, they gave him back to the leaders of the Jewish faith, to the temple leaders, and they insisted that he must be crucified because they saw him as a rebel. He talked about stuff that they didn't like. You know, he called them out for their double standards, for their rules that they themselves don't follow, but their followers need to follow them, for their actually dead faith, because it was just a faith, as he said, of lip service. There was no heart in it. So they really didn't like this guy, and that's why they insisted that he would be crucified, because that's the way the Romans got rid of their people that was rebellious. That was the symbol of the cross at that stage. And then at 70 after Christ, there was another revolt against the Roman Empire done by the Maccabeans, who were part of the Israeli people. They stood up against the Roman Empire, and again, they were crushed. And this time it was so severe that the temple in Jerusalem was burned down and destroyed. And since then, 70 after Christ, that temple has never been built again. Till this day, there is no temple in Jerusalem because it was destroyed in 70 after Christ. So in that sense, it is not strange that Christians, when they see the cross and they know this history that happened during and after the life of Jesus, when the Romans were in control of Israel, it is not strange that the cross has this meaning of death, of blood, of sacrificing a life of people that doesn't want to be in line. And the Christians were for many years seen as people that didn't fit in because they had a new way of living, a new message that was quite strange in the times where they lived. But back to our Old Testament archeological findings. Now this cross, we believe as Christians, is unique to us, and it is our symbol. Now we know today there are more than 100 crosses in use across the world by different groups for different reasons, so it is not unique to the Christian faith. It also doesn't originate from the Christian faith. 13,000 years ago at Lake Vaughan there was a temple. How old that temple was the day it was destroyed or covered up by soil, we do not know. So that temple can go for many years before 13,000 years ago. It's been dated there at that stage, and it's been dated by using organic material that they find between the rocks. As this temple was covered with soil, the organic material was caught up there, and they could date that. You cannot date rock. And it's not me that's so clever. I'm not an archaeologist. It is Matt LaCroix that explains this in real detail. You can follow him on YouTube if you want more information about this really groundbreaking information that we have to us today to talk about our faith and where does it come from. So there they found at Lake Vaughan, at this temple, and in later talks we will go and see, who those people were, where did they come from, why did they build the temple there, what are their history, and that will take us even further back in the history of humankind. So the findings by archaeologists must always fit into the narrative of the day. And for many years, especially the early years, where there was a literal understanding of the Bible, that narrative was caught up within a 6,000-year history. So everything needed to be explained within the past 6,000 years. So that's 4,000 years before Christ and the 2,000 years where we are now after Christ. So academics must write their academical papers within that narrative. It's still going on in the United States and in many, many other Christian universities and countries. It must fit in there because that's the narrative of the day. The world is just 6,000 years old. It's been created through the 7-day creation story in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. And now we see, oh my goodness, but these stories are way older because we find them in the Ashurbanipal library as being recorded there as stories that the Sumerians knew about. And the Sumerians goes way more back than just 6,000 years. We find these same stories at Lake Vaughan in that temple, in those temples that's been excavated and looked at and studied, which is 13,000 years. And that refers to older stories which go thousands and thousands of years back. The time that we as Christians stand on this illusion that the world's just 6,000 years old is way gone. We cannot silence people anymore that says this is not true. We cannot ignore evidence like these archaeological findings anymore, because that kind of attitude makes our faith irrelevant in a modern day where we have the methods of studying these old archaeological artifacts. So here we are. We sit with a cross, 13,000 years old, the oldest that we have up to date. I believe there will be discoveries that will teach us in future way older traditions that we do not know about. Because when you excavate an archaeological site, you start from the top. And as I said, you move very slowly. They open a layer within 50 years and then they publish their findings, and then it's been studied for many years. And so this Lake Vaughan site we know of, or is public knowledge since 2017. That's just the other day. So it's brand new knowledge that we have today, and we cannot ignore it anymore. So at this site, when you go down, you discover layer upon layer upon layer, and every layer is a civilization. And we will talk about this later, but there's also a layer of just rubbish. We believe that's the layer of the deluge, of the story of Noah. But it's way older than what it was published in the book of Genesis. This goes back also thousands of years, and there's a reason for that which we will visit later in these talks. So then they go through that layer, and then they find below that layer, which we now call the deluge layer, other civilizations, and they uncover that, and so it goes on. So as they move down, history unfolds, and we start to understand where we come from. And today we believe, with the evidence that we already have, that us as humans, or humanity, or Homo sapiens, or what you want to call us, is around about on Earth for more or less 200,000 years. Now that is way more than the Christian story of 6,000 years. And in 200,000 years, just imagine what happened through all those civilizations, and what happened that ended them and new civilizations started again, which is an ongoing story. We start a civilization, hunter-gatherers, we develop, become a bronze, and then a silver, and then a golden age, and then it ends, and then it starts over again. That cycle goes on for 200,000 years. And we can find that in the archaeological findings. It is not guesswork anymore. It is facts. As Jesus said, the rocks will call out the truth. So back to our story. Why do we talk about this? Around this cross, there were other symbols that taught the people that would come into this temple the truth of their day, the religion of their day, if you want to call it a religion, the thoughts of their day, the way they looked at their world. And it's interesting, and there's a picture that I will show, and on this picture there you can see that we have the cross in the middle. There are three. If you look around that middle cross, there are one to the left and one to the right, and between them there is a picture of a man kneeling, handing something, and that is a depiction of the God of the day, handing this cross. And then on the other symbols that's encircled there, we find the hourglass, we find the griffin, and we find the sun. And alongside every one of these symbols, you find this picture of this God handing that to the people coming into this temple. So that is very interesting. And this picture that I borrow here from Matt LaCroix, and I just want to thank him for giving this, and so that we can use it to understand our own history within Christianity and our own symbols. Now it becomes really interesting. The griffin we can find in every civilization across the world. It's not only at Lake Vaughan, it's in Egypt, the Sphinx. It's in South America and Central America. You can find it everywhere. All the civilizations in history has this. The sun as well. You can find that in the Mayans tradition. You can find that in Egypt, in all of those temples that we have there. So it's universal symbols across the world that had specific meaning. And we believe, and that's where we as theologians can offer some insight in what these symbols may have meant. Because we know the sun is the source of life and energy of this planet. The sun shines, plants grow. I don't need to explain that to you. It gives energy. If you take the sun away, energy is gone and everything dies on this planet. We are in a certain spot in our solar system so that everything is in perfect balance and life can survive on this planet. So the sun is a life-giving symbol. It was also celebrated when the sun in wintertime go to the southern hemisphere, this winter solstice of the northern hemisphere, or the summer solstice of the southern hemisphere. Christmas was celebrated in the northern hemisphere as the birth of the sun. And today we have Christmas as a Christian festival. It originated in a pagan festival where, if you want to call it pagan, where the sun has been celebrated as returning after going south in the winter time, returning, bringing new life, bringing new energy, bringing new ways of doing new things in this new season that is coming. So it's really a life-giving symbol. And that's why the Christians decided to also in the time of Caesar, he incorporated the the winter solstice festival that stretched over 5 days from 20 to 25 December, somewhere there, and they celebrated this. It was a really gruesome festival if you want to go and read the history, but that was incorporated into Christianity and it became our Christmas. That's why our Christmas is celebrated every year on 25 December. It's from this festival. So anyway, all of this starts to make sense because the other symbol, the griffin, a griffin is a lion and an eagle cross, and it has the feathers and the power and the strength. It reminds us of what Ezekiel 1 is talking about when he talks about the Holy Spirit as the one with the wings and the power to make change and to bring change on the world. And then Huldi, that is what that God is called on the picture, Huldi in that time at Lake Vaughan, handing these wisdom symbols to the people that enter the sanctuary or the temple at that time. So the cross in that days symbolized these wisdom traditions that was given by the God of the day to the people that came to the temple to come and worship, or to come and find wisdom, or to come and find awakening, or whatever. And we will look into all of that in future. What did they do there? Why did they go there? And what did they do with these symbols? So this is a short introduction that we have discussed here at Faith United, and that we will keep on discussing. Very interesting stuff around Haldi I will discuss in future, the god of the day. Just to name but a couple of names, Haldi in the Sumerian tradition was known as Enlil. Enlil or Ellil became in the Hebrew tradition El or Yahweh. So it's different names for this God that they believed created them and looked after them. And that's the Old Testament God. Not a very friendly guy. And that's why the Jewish people of today that still believe strongly in the Yahweh as their God in the Old Testament can make war and destroy people and say that is God's will. So we will look into all of this, how it fits into our Christian faith today, what we can learn from that, and how we move forward. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you very soon with the follow-up of this discussion and more interesting stuff that we cannot ignore. And I want to emphasize this. We cannot ignore this anymore, because if we do, we make the Christian faith more and more irrelevant. And we are becoming irrelevant very fast. Just look at our churches. They are dying across the whole world. They are emptying out because modern people just walk away and say, you do not know what you're talking about. And in some sense, they are quite right, because the knowledge is out there, but we ignore it because we are holding on to what we believe is the ultimate knowledge of the Christian faith. And those days are over. So let us open up and let us awake ourselves to the truths that are available. And we incorporate that and understand our own faith better and better every day. Thanks for listening. Again, if you like it, hit the like button. If you want to hear more and follow these talks, hit the subscribe button and become part of my YouTube channel. And we see each other quickly in future. Thanks.